Hi everyone, I'm going to be speaking to you today about the Cancer Solstice, which is going to be happening on the 21st of June. It's going to be happening in the UK on the clock at 9:25 in the morning, so you have to adjust for your own time zone. But just to say, this is never, of course, just for one day. We're going to be looking at the chart for the moment, but that chart of the moment really sets the backdrop, the canvas, if you like, for the next 3 months until the Libra equinox. And then we layer on top of that all of the other action and transits of the planets in all of the updates all astrologers go through. But this is the backdrop. So it's actually each solstice and equinox is very important, and we know that the ancient peoples always held ceremonies at this time because they were aware that the veil was thinner. They could access high-level information more quickly. And so many meditations take place around the world the day of the solstice, or as Rory Duff used to establish, it was the day before the solstices and equinoxes when all of the Earth's energy lines came into harmony. The late, great Rory Duff, he's sadly missed. So I've been talking about this period of time coming up for about 2 years now. And I'll put the list of videos below where I have been talking about this. There's the big picture, the metamorphosis for humanity, convergences and game changers. And there've been, virtually every update I've done has been talking about this period of time. This 2025 to 2027 period of time as being an accelerated period of consciousness, growth in consciousness. But this 2026 year, because it's a 1 year, it's the year of the fire horse, is incredibly dynamic. And we are entering a very dynamic, fast-moving 3 months. So no surprise there. The energy is about amplification. And so whatever state of being you are in, it is going to be amplified as we go into these next 3 months. So be very aware, and I'll come back to this later in the video, but be very aware of your state of being, because if you're in, churn and chaos and fear, that's going to be amplified moving into this incredible opportunity, this 3-month opportunity. If you're in joy, love, compassion, gratitude, you're going to have a very different experience because that's going to be amplified. And we know that in systems theory, when old systems collapse, which is absolutely right on time, what we're seeing at the moment, and you're going to see an awful lot more of it in the next few months, it has the greatest potential for a quantum leap, a change of state, quantum leap. So be aware that nobody forces you into any state of being but you. Nobody can choose that for you, only you. So this is teaching us mastery in a pretty brisk way, I think. I think, and several astrologers have said this already, it's hard to be precise. I mean, I never tend to predict. I tend to look at energies and themes rather than specific predictions. But we can be less precise, I think, than we have been in the past. And that is because we are shifting dimensions. We've lived most of our lives in 3D, where things were much more solid and visible and tangible, etc. But now we're moving into higher dimensions where the ether is thinner and they are less visible. And so things are going to become more malleable, more fluid. We have a bigger role and a recognition of a bigger role in weaving our future. And so, as Dorothy said in The Wizard of Oz, we're not in Kansas anymore. We've left the tram tracks of the old 3D context, because in the old days up to now, astrologers could look at just like economic cycles or weather cycles. We could look at previous times we had particular transits and make intelligent estimates of what was going to come up this time. That is going to work less precisely because we're shifting dimensions as well, and we have no context. In our own memory, we have no context for that. So I just want to make that point, really, because I think it's quite important as we go through this incredibly powerful 3 months. So let me show you the chart now. So as always, I set this for London, ignore the clock face, ignore the houses, and we're just going to look at where the planets fall and their aspects to each other. So as always, the Cancer Solstice is defined as when the sun enters 0 of Cancer, and that happens 8:25 GMT, and we're still in British summertime here, so 9:25 on the clock in the UK. And we see a heavy emphasis in Cancer, Sun, Mercury, Jupiter in Cancer. And so Cancer, a water sign, and very much concerned with self-care, nurturing, caring for others, being sensitive and empathetic. Jupiter is exalted here. So perhaps in Cancer, which is to do with the family, we are developing a more expansive view of what family represents for us than before. And so is this starting to incorporate galactic beings? Because we are galactic citizens already. We have, galactic genetics. I mean, I think increasingly we're recognizing that. And it isn't just the disclosure film. I haven't seen that myself, so I can't really comment. But just in general, with the Pentagon releasing some UFO files recently, there's a lot more to come around this whole area of our galactic heritage. Now, that's partly because Uranus has been squaring the nodes, the nodal axis. It did that exactly on the 12th of June. It's exact all June. Well, it's operational all June. But we also have Uranus in Gemini. So to speak about the galactic beings, Uranus is going to become more day-to-day, Gemini more commonplace, as it were. And I don't know whether you felt, I think Uranus square to the nodal axis on the 12th and into that weekend with the new moon in Gemini on the 14th, 15th, there was a huge shift of energy. I know these keep on coming. I felt it particularly strongly, along with many, many other people. So I'm just highlighting that because we're going through these evolutionary waves, as we know, and I was absolutely flattened on Sunday the 14th, and then felt very different by the next day. So when you get physical symptoms where you're absolutely wiped out, or you've got aches or pains, or whatever it is, recognize them as evidence of your ascension, of your evolutionary jumps, because our physical bodies are trying to assimilate and integrate and accommodate energies we've never experienced before, because we are making this ascension in our physicality, in our physical bodies. Now, in addition to all of that water, Cancer's a water sign, we also have the Sun square to Neptune. Neptune, of course, is the ruler of Pisces. And so, again, more emphasis on water. So on the one hand, the Sun square to Neptune is visionary, it's idealistic, and we're going to see a lot of that in the world we want to create. But also, because it rules the seas, again, we have this theme of water, the seas, the oceans, heavy rainfall, flooding. It may also be linked to deception or the illusion, the veil starting to fall away because it's in Aries, drugs, health, because it's also, apart from Neptune being connected to health and the immune system, also the nodal axis is still in Pisces Virgo, which is known as the health axis. So we may see more revelations coming up about health, but potentially I think we're going to see some pretty strong weather. It could be a lot of fire because there's an Aries emphasis here, but it could also be a lot of rain and flooding. Also, we could see issues around toxicity of water coming up strongly, the state of our water, the amount of water. Do we have enough water? And I know this is a drum I keep banging, but because of the rapid expansion of data centers, sometimes larger than the resident population, and the demands on water to cool the servers and power to generate them, electricity, sometimes those demands are greater than that of the resident population. And that is creating, issues with the water too. So I think we're going to see a lot around that, because Neptune is also in this sextile to Pluto. Pluto in Aquarius, very much about technology. And although sextiles are generally positive, nevertheless, because Pluto is also square to Chiron in Taurus, I've got a separate video on that I'll put below. I think, that's going to become a much more widespread issue. But nevertheless, the Cancer emphasis and the Sun square to Neptune highlighting our intuition and greater psychic sensitivity moving forwards in these 3 months. I think that's going to be very marked, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But this is going to be a big time, beginning now in the Cancer solstice, of revelation and revolution. Revelation, because Uranus is square to the nodal axis, and also it is in trine to Pluto. And as I've spoken about many, many times, the seed point of that trine was the conjunction in 1965-66, and that was an extremely revolutionary time for humanity right across the world. So revelation and revolution, and revelation feeding revolution, because as truth comes to light, people are going to feel more rebellious. And that's happening already, but will happen even more. Now, another important aspect here is that the Sun is opposing Vada, and Vada is, well, it's on the world axis, because it's about to tip into Capricorn, 0 of Capricorn. And it is also, of course, every Cancer solstice, the Sun is going to be at 0 of Cancer, of course, but it's not always going to be opposed by Vada, because Vada over the next 2 to 3 years is going to move beyond that 0 of Capricorn point. But at the moment, it's very highlighted. So Vada, you will remember, was in the original Tolkien creation myth. She placed the stars in the sky, and she has strong association with the elemental beings, the elves, the tree beings, etc. So this Sun-Vada opposition is again bringing up this tuning into other realms, other dimensions. Kelly Kolodny is starting to talk about this as well, with her exquisite channeling from Archangel Raphael. She's going into some very elemental light codes moving forwards. In addition to that, we have Saturn conjunct Lilia Ku Honua. And I had a wonderful conversation with Alan Clay a few days ago about these dwarf planets. I'll put the link for that below as well. And Alan was really talking about how this dwarf planet, which they've discovered now has a 55,000-year orbit. Can you imagine? By far the furthest out orbit that we're aware of is bringing information from, very distant galaxies. And it is linked to our multidimensionality, which we are now embodying. Our multidimensionality, embodying, because it's conjunct, very tightly conjunct Saturn. Saturn is making it real, tangible. And Lilia Ku Honua is also about the bridge between heaven and earth, the earth and the cosmos. We are going to discover so much more about the cosmos. And that isn't just Pluto in Aquarius, it's also this conjunction. You know, we're pioneering new ground with all this Aries energy as well. Now, Saturn is also conjunct Salacia at this Cancer solstice. And remember, this is spanning the next 3 months, okay? So this is about living, loving liquid light. I believe it's not just the very high frequency light that we see on the seas and the oceans, that shimmering light and mermaid light. Again, you know, tuning into other dimensions with mermaids. But I believe it's actually linked to the living, loving liquid light, which we are also embodying. Incredibly close, you know, 7 minutes from exactitude, conjunction to Saturn as we move towards the light body. So, and going back to Lilia Kuhonoa, Philip Sedgwick, the brilliant astrology researcher, I'll again put his website, the link for that below, is linking the meaning of this dwarf planet to a search for a higher galactic connection, a yearning to return to deep cosmic home, infinite possibilities. And the very name itself is Hawaiian for where the sky meets the heavens. I mean, this is beautiful. You know, we're getting into these vast horizons. We're lifting our eyes from the very small contracted world we've lived in into something much more multidimensional and infinite. And we're entering this right now. This is not a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road. This is right now. And it's right on time. So together, on the one hand, with all the chaos and the collapse of the old world, look to this magical new future and vision that is part of the promise of this Cancer solstice. I mean, just beautiful. In addition, we have Venus in Leo, Venus very happy in Leo, heart energy. And on the one hand, you know, that's very sociable, it's fun, it's playful, it's creative. Venus is trine to Neptune. This is about aesthetics and beauty and creativity, and also romance. You know, so personally, a lot of romances could be popping up right now. But also, Venus is conjunct the dwarf planet Varuna. And Varuna brings us back to this theme of the waters, because Varuna was the Vedic water deity, the god of the oceans, the rivers, also the heavens, very linked to natural law and cosmic law. These dwarf planets have a very strong moral compass. And so she also deals, or he, it's a he, a correction, deals with vast horizons, you know, the immense scale of things. So we are just going to get a much greater sense of moving beyond our to-date contraction to something way, way bigger and better. The sun is also trine to the North Node. North Node still conjunct Fomalhaut pretty tightly. Fomalhaut, remember, is linked to Archangel Gabriel, one of the 4 royal stars of Persia, and this brings in a spiritual context and impulse to these next 3 months. So, you know, some very beautiful elements to this Cancer solstice. The ruler of Cancer is, of course, the moon. And the moon here is at 23 of Virgo. So Virgo is an earth sign, and it's very much to do with purification. Purification. So it brings us back to this theme of any toxicity that is appearing. We are going to be very focused on the earth, because the moon is very tightly trying to Mars in Taurus here. So Mars is kind of fighting for the earth here, being a steward, a guardian of the earth, and finding ways to purify, whether it's the waters, the seas, the oceans with their toxicity and pollution, or whether it's concern for the earth, Taurus, fixed earth. And There's a sense of being in service to the earth that's coming in very strongly here as well with the Virgo, moon in Virgo. Also concerned for the fertility of the earth, Taurus, food growing, food production, highlighted here. And actually Ceres, the dwarf planet Ceres, is at 9 degrees of Gemini, so conjunct Uranus as well. New discoveries, new ways of growing food that I think will come in. And I've got a whole video on Chiron entering Taurus. As I say, Chiron has just tipped into Taurus on the 19th of June. And this is becoming again more aware of where the healing is needed for our bodies, physical bodies, Taurus, and also for the earth, Taurus. It takes us back to shamanic practices, one of the aspects of the archetype of Chiron, but also together with the remembrance of ancient wisdom at the same time. And that's emphasized by the opposition to Homer here, Homer being the dwarf planet linked to a lot of shamanic practices and also linked to healing technologies, regeneration, stem cell medicine, longevity. And we're starting to see a lot of those technologies appear right now. You're going to see a lot more of them moving forwards as well. The other thing I would pick up here, the other aspect, is Venus is opposing Pluto. We could see some fundamental changes because Pluto is big money. And Venus is also to do with money, currency, wealth, the stock markets. So we could see some fundamental changes beginning to come in. They could be digital, Aquarius in trine to Uranus in Gemini, or attempts at centralized digitization, but many micro developments of digitization as well, which are going to be very helpful for us. I do think there are going to be some big changes in that whole area of the financial system, because Chiron is also in Taurus. That takes us back to the simple, the fundamental. And I think particularly in this second half of the year of 2026, I think more into the autumn, frankly, when Venus starts to move retrograde as well. But I do think we're going to see quite a lot of changes in that area. In terms of another whole theme, Uranus in Gemini is about freedom of speech and issues around freedom of speech. I've mentioned before that the brilliant astrologer Frank Clifford reminded us that the George Orwell very well-known novel 1984 was published within a day of the last cycle of Uranus in Gemini. So George Orwell was seeing very strongly issues around free speech. But I also think it's about more independent journalism than we've seen in the past. Independent Uranus journalism, Gemini. And in this trine to Pluto, I can see a lot of new networks springing up, of all kinds, where freedom of speech can take place. Those could be social media platforms, they could be meditation groups, they could be earth stewardship groups, they could be food growing groups, they could be all kinds of different groups, different values around groups, but nevertheless, there will be underground Pluto networks, Aquarius, springing up in order to protect free speech. So I think that's a really positive aspect of this. And a lot of youth is going to come big time into this because Gemini is linked to youth, Uranus is linked to youth, Uranus rules Aquarius. A lot of young people with their tech savvy inventing a lot of really interesting ways to go beyond mainstream media and whatever controls are popping up. Now we have a lot of sextiles here, which is really interesting. We have a sextile, pretty much exact sextile within 3 minutes of the Sun to Chiron. We also have the Sun to the South Node. We have Mars in sextile to Jupiter. That's about fighting for causes. We also have Mercury, very tight sextile to Mars, and that's about speaking out on issues that you care about to do with the earth and also caring for ourselves, Cancer. It's also, by the way, this conjunction between Jupiter and Mercury is very much about future thinking, big thinking for our future. We also have a sextile between Uranus and Neptune, and that's part of this whole mini grand trine aspect, which we're going to be talking about in great detail in July. And this is about experiencing dimensions of reality you didn't believe existed. Technology going viral in all kinds of different ways. Neptune is also sextile Pluto, and that is about the paranormal. Again, accessing the paranormal, all kinds of spirit visitations, ghostly events, again, seeing in other dimensions in a way that we haven't done before. Now, already, Pluto is opposing Jupiter here. It's out of sign because Jupiter hasn't yet entered Leo. It will enter Leo on the 30th of June, and then it will be in sign. But even here, it is an out of sign opposition. Now, this says a lot about wealth. People who have these aspects, Jupiter-Pluto aspects, particularly the conjunction, like Warren Buffett, I understand, has a conjunction between Jupiter-Pluto, one of the richest people in the world, or even a trine. Any positive aspect, they tend to be very wealthy, easily become wealthy. So this is about big money, and Pluto is often about big wealth, hidden money, secret money. So it's interesting that this Cancer Solstice is setting up this theme and possibly the inequality of wealth. Some people being just tear-wateringly rich with millions and billions, and other people being, really desperately poor. It's also about power, this combination of planets. It's also about leadership. And I'll say much more about all of those things as we get into the July updates. Also, we are going to see, I think, a lot of inflation this year, more so when Jupiter moves into Leo and is in a trine. Although trine's a very positive aspect, it kind of magnifies Neptune being in Aries, because we know when Neptune is in a fire sign, it tends to bring in inflation. So I think we could see a lot more of that. So those are just broad themes. And the themes video that I'll stop sharing here. The themes that video that I did right at the beginning of the year for 2026, all of those things still stand. They're unfolding, manifesting, emerging, all of them still stand. So you can check that out. And that is very reassuring, because when people get anxious about the chaos and the turbulence and the war and all of those have enormous human suffering, enormous, which is why we've got to change the game. But it's also very reassuring in terms of this isn't a surprise. It isn't a surprise. It's right on time with what we expected at this time, with the crescendo, the peak, certainly one of the main peaks being this July. This June, July, August is the period. And so remember what I was saying at the beginning, that this energy, because of those planets in Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer, will amplify your emotional state and your awareness of that, particularly if you're in a positive emotional state. So if you are choosing to focus on the outer world, the external world, with its turbulence, its chaos, its zigzags, its distractions, its suffering, its war, the future that you will be manifesting will be more chaotic, more unstable, more technological, more controlled, But remember, nobody chooses that focus but you. Only you choose your focus. I've said this so often. However, if you're living in your inner world, the outside world is very, very complex indeed. Zillion problems. We don't know where to begin with all the problems. You turn inwards to your breath, to your heart. It gets really simple. It gets very easy to focus on your heart, your breath, or breathing through your heart, very one-pointed. So if you're living in your inner world, it will be much easier for you to access peace, calm, bliss, compassion, gratitude, appreciation, those very positive emotions, a stronger sense of sovereignty. And you'll become increasingly aware that you are creating that by the choice of your focus. You won't necessarily be aware of that if you're focused on the external world, because it'd be too jazzed up and crazy, and that can cause some mental health stress for sure. But if you're turning inwards, then you'll become, at this time with these energies, you will become more aware that you are in mastery of your internal state, and increasingly, therefore, in charge of how that is manifesting in your reality. And just do it as an experiment for a month. As I've said so often, just, even if you don't really believe me, do as an experiment for a month and see how your day-to-day reality changes. But be diligent with this. Don't just do it for 10 minutes a day. Be diligent with it and just see how dynamics with relationships, little interactions in shops and stores with neighbors and friends, how it changes, because it changes a lot, really quite quickly. I'd also suggest be creative. This is very creative energy. Venus in Leo here with some beautiful aspects. And in any way you can be creative, even by making small changes in your day-to-day routine. That's creative. If you choose to walk a different way, or you do your routine in a different order, or anything like that, even tiny changes. You decide to go to that party or the event that you'd normally turn down because you're just too tired and you can't be bothered. Make a change from what your routine would normally be or your behavior would normally be. And, so don't wait for the change to come to you. Don't wait, create. We are creating from the inside out. That is so important. I'd say connect with nature more than you have, and feel in your heart. Do anything you can to move from your head to your heart. So whether it's being in nature, hugging trees, talking to the trees and the birds and the elementals, even if you can't hear them talk back yet, whether it's starting to do, write some poetry or paint, just for you. You don't need to show it to anyone, just for you. Whether it's turning inwards with your heart and your breath. So you're feeling you're in the body rather than thinking in the head. Remember, revelation and revolution are going to be very strong for the rest of this year, really strong. Authenticity is a big deal. Uranus is very strong this year. Pluto in Aquarius that Uranus rules. Truth. Authenticity. Stand in your truth kindly, but stand in your truth in a bigger way than you have before. Maybe where you wouldn't say something, or you'd bend to somebody else's opinion to keep the peace and, be a people pleaser and not rock the boat. Stand in your truth. Stand in your authenticity. See yourself as a kind of beacon of light, almost that you've got this pillar of light down your spine, which is a pillar of light of authenticity. Almost see it in your third eye. So, because these are, really, really big times. The other thing I'd say is, because we know, and I've talked so much about it in previous videos, that coherence is our superpower, heart coherence, and how that affects people around us, how we infect environments and people once we're in heart coherence. And again, go on to Heart Math, listen to previous updates that I've talked about this. But with all of the chaos and change and instability going on, what is really important is to find a way to hold your energetic stability. So whether it's breath work, whether it's candle gazing, where you've got that one-pointed focus, whether it's chanting, whether it's Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, whether it's bare feet on the ground, blending with nature and feeling part of it, that sense of energetic stability and physiological harmony, which coherence represents, hold it like a note, like an opera singer that can hold a note going on and 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 on. Because when we can do that, when we can hold an energetic state of coherence, that's a big, big part of our mastery. With all of the zigzags, the craziness, did you hear, he, she, good guy, bad guy, what's happened now, what's happened with the, crazy. Hold the note of energetic stability and coherence, which is, I think, a really good, and they're all simple, free ways of doing it, as I've described, because if we can focus as humanity on the future we want, don't wait, create. And all of us are doing this in pockets, as I say, all over the world in our different ways. That, I've become even more aware today of another network I wasn't aware of. We're all holding the light in different ways. This very loving community, you follow my videos with so much love, and it always brings me to tears to read the comments, and I try and read every one. And, I just a million thank yous for your loyalty and love, a million thank yous, because I wouldn't be doing this without you. If you weren't interested, I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere. So this is a community, and there are many, many communities who are little pockets of light all around the world. And the more we can focus on what we want to create, which is a much more loving world, we create a momentum as we turn away from, the ball and chain of the old world and just let it collapse behind us. The faster, the better, because we're going to create something amazing over here with respect for all living beings, not just we as humans, galactics, animals, elementals, trees, all of it, as one consciousness. The more of us that can do that, we start to create a real momentum, which these evolutionary waves that Dr. David Clements talks about so eloquently, other people are talking about them too, but he is one of the most prominent people talking about them. And it's going to peak at the end of June, he said, this particular wave. He said that with me. He said that very recently on Heart Coherence Collective interview as well. You can hear him say it there. The more we can gather that momentum with the help of these cosmic waves, it's like a snowball rolling down a mountain. It is absolutely unstoppable and accelerated. Unstoppable and accelerated. And what I think we're going to start to see in the second half of 2026 and going much more into 2027 is manifestations of this much more loving world, if you are on a positively focused timeline. Only you choose that, remember. Hate to keep reminding. We are going to see more and more pockets of amazing people doing amazing things. And we're going to connect those nodes of light across the world to form bigger and bigger networks, Aquarius energy, to really change the world. God bless. Hope that's helped you. Can be back super soon with something very different. God bless. Bye for now. Thank you for listening.